Fox News Alert, we are 30 minutes now until the first of 3 hearings on the Hill this week on the IRS scandal. Today, a House Appropriations Subcommittee will talk with current IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel. You heard that preview at the top of the hour. And then tomorrow, some of the groups actually targeted will get a chance to be heard in front of the Ways and Means Committee. Joining me now, 3 of the groups who say they have been targeted. Brian Brown is president of the National Organization for Marriage. Lori Marcus is president and founder of Z Street, a pro-Israel group. And Scottie Hughes is news director for the Tea Party News Network. Thank you all so much for being here. This is going to be really interesting tomorrow because it'll be the first time they cast this wide net. You know, so far the story has emerged in a piecemeal fashion. And then we have day by day more groups coming out of the woodwork saying, I believe I was targeted as well. Let me start with you, Brian, because your group, the National Organization for Marriage, came up as recently as the presidential election because you believe not only were you targeted, your group, but that your confidential tax return was actually leaked, perhaps to help the president in his re-election battle. Tell us.
Well, a year ago, in actually March of 2012, we came to find out that our political opponents, the folks at the Human Rights Campaign, actually had a copy of our confidential tax information, including our donor names. And through some research, we realized that this had come directly from the IRS. We don't have the document with the IRS stamps on it. This is only held by the IRS. And the Human Rights Campaign and other groups had taken that document and tried to sort of white out and stamp out the fact that it had this identifying information from the IRS. And they had released it with our donor names on it. And the reality is that it is a felony to use the private and confidential tax information, tax returns. This goes back to the articles of impeachment on President Nixon. And this was given to our political opponents, the head of the Human Rights Campaign, was a co-chair for President Obama's re-election campaign. And we've seen donors targeted who stand up for traditional marriage. And there needs to be action. Over the last year, we've heard a lot of excuses. TIGTA, evidently the watchdog group of the IRS, has launched an investigation, but they aren't giving any information to Congress. And this has to stop, and these folks have to be held accountable.
We heard it in the run-up to the last election because among your donors was listed Mitt Romney, and it came up about whether he supported traditional marriage or not and why he had made a donation to your group. And so this became, you know, that information did become relevant in the presidential campaign, thus leading some to question, you know, what would the motive have been in leaking it? Was it leaked? And how can we firmly establish one way or the other? One of the many things they're going to be looking into now. Lori, we spoke with you last week about Z Street, this organization that is pro-Israel, but you don't make donations or rally donors so much as just promote your beliefs, and yet you believe that those mere beliefs subjected you to additional scrutiny. Tell us again.
Yes, absolutely, because that's all we do is we educate, we provide information, period. We don't give resources in any way, shape, or form to anyone, anywhere. So the targeting of our organization was purely on the basis of our beliefs. And we were told by the IRS agent in charge of our case that the IRS apparently regularly looks at groups which take positions that are inconsistent with the administration's public policy that is unconstitutional. It's viewpoint discrimination.
Scottie, you're with the Tea Party group, and that we know. I mean, there's no question, right? There's right. Zero question now that the Tea Party groups were targeted. And yet today we have the emergence of some actual testimony from one of these Cincinnati caseworkers who is refusing to be thrown under the bus as rogue, who is saying, look, I took my marching orders from my superiors, and I believe that those superiors included those in Washington, D.C., and came out and said specifically that I was told, he said, we were told in March of 2010 to go and get, D.C. wanted some cases. How many were there? Less than 40. Some went to D.C. How many? I sent seven cases to D.C. And then he goes on to say, or she, no, that they said D.C. wanted 7 cases. And so your reaction to that news, that, I mean, that somebody in Washington is calling up the Cincinnati tax-exempt group and saying, get me specific Tea Party cases, and here's the bare minimum I want you to send me.
Well, listen, if anybody thinks that this is just a bunch of frat boys who are sitting around a Cincinnati office and saying, who do we want to target? Let's target the Tea Party. I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you for about $5.50. I think America has shown over and over again, and they're starting to learn, Americans, why we don't trust the government, because everything that we've been saying that the government is doing, like Valerie Jarrett said when she said they would remember those that did not support President Obama, that they would not forget, is happening. And we're seeing these targeting of these different groups, whether it be the religious or the IRS or the different Tea Party groups. And that's one thing that I don't think anybody's really surprised about, that this really did go all the way up to the White House. Now we just have to get people to actually remember or not claim the fifth and actually take claim for the problems that they've created.
You know, Brian, your situation alleges something even more sinister, arguably. I mean, because it's bad enough to target these groups who are applying for tax-exempt status. But boy, you take it to another realm when you say, you know, we had our tax-exempt status, our tax return information, confidential tax information, was leaked to hurt us. I mean, now that's something, you know, people don't want to believe that the IRS is going to use the data we are forced by law to provide to them to try to hurt us politically or in any other way. Have you been able to substantiate that it was an IRS person who leaked that? Is there any other way that HRC could have gotten its hands on your confidential tax data?
No, the stamps on the document, we don't even have the document that was released. It has stamps that are internal to the IRS on it. That is very clear. So it came from the IRS. And look, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. If the government is targeting and attempting to intimidate political opponents, today it can be us, the next day it can be the other side of the aisle. It has to stop. It is profoundly un-American. We've been screaming from the mountaintops for the last year about this, and I am just very glad that Congress is moving forward, that the American people are seeing what is going on. And at the end of the day, we need answers. We've done repeated Freedom of Information Act requests to try and see if anything has been found out. And we have simply been stonewalled. We need Congress to move forward. We need a thorough investigation. And we need to know for certain if this goes, how high this goes. It is not at all encouraging that, again, this was given to a co-chair of President Obama's re-election campaign. That's just wrong, and we need answers, and we need them quickly.
Lori, when you hear, you know, the administration leak to certain news outlets that this is 2 rogue employees in the Cincinnati office, and you know there's no link to D.C., and even the Inspector General has said. Now, keep in mind, he did an audit, not a full investigation. He just audited the facts and figures, and that's what the Republicans have been saying, like, we need something more than an audit. But he says, I didn't uncover anything that would challenge the assertion by those involved that this was not political. What's your reaction?
Well, I happen to know that plenty of organizations whose views were consistent with the administration's with respect to Israel did receive their tax-exempt status. And so every excuse that we were given so far doesn't hold water. It is clear to me that there was an effort, a concerted effort, and not just from some, quote, rogue employees, to stall those whose views differ from those of the administration. Whether it came from the White House itself or some people connected thereto, I don't know, but it's clear that it wasn't just some people sitting in Cincinnati.
Scottie, when you now hear some on the left, including some of the president's top advisors, come out and say what this really needs to be about at this point is this extra scrutiny that the groups applying for this tax-exempt status should get. In other words, they're turning this to be more about the 501c4 as an issue that's been big for the left from the beginning. They don't think that there should be so many Tea Party groups able to engage in what they think is political activity, and they think that that's really the heart of what we should walk away with here, which is the extra scrutiny that those 501c4s deserve.
Well, you're completely right, and we're all for the extra scrutiny, but let's be fair about the extra scrutiny. Let's do it to the Democratic organizations, let's do it to the independent, as well as the conservative. Let's do it across the board. That's not what we're screaming. We want to make sure that all rights are protected going forward. And instead of that, what we've seen here is the pointless targeting for conservative groups and Tea Party groups, and that's something that doesn't need to happen with any administration. And if we're sitting here talking about an organization that has had 220 conferences with $50 million bills, and they're sitting there doing the cha-cha slide or the Cupid shuffle, there's more corruption than just sitting there and targeting our groups. They also need to look internally as well.
I want to ask you quickly, Scottie, before I let you go. When you hear that the donations that come out of the IRS union went 95%, I think, to Democrats and President Obama, and the actual tax-exempt group out of Cincinnati, the reported contributions, according to, I think, the Washington Examiner, said they went 100% to Democrats. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like the Tea Party groups will get fair treatment now going forward?
Oh, no. There's no doubt in my mind that we're never going to see exact fairness across the board. But the key is America has woken. Everybody is now watching, and they're going to pay attention. Instead of people thinking it's just them themselves, we're going to know that we need to make voice our opinions, and we need to show that these kind of things are happening. And in reality, they can sit there and have their parties all they want, but they have to realize the only party I want to see is when they cut my taxes and are responsibly spending my dollars. Then they can throw their little party.
That's an interesting point, because, you know, you sit there, I imagine all three of you sat there at one point and said, am I nuts? Like, am I just paranoid? Like, they're thinking that they're targeting me because I'm pro-Israel, because I'm pro-traditional marriage, or I'm Tea Partier. And it's not until you start talking and you start to hear other stories of validation, like it happened to me too, it happened to me too, and now you get validated by an inspector general, that you realize you're not crazy, you're not paranoid, you're not a conspiracy theorist. This really was happening. Brian, I'll give you the quick last word.
Well, again, I think that it's critical that all of us unite together, whatever our political stances is. This is America. This is not the Soviet Union. We do not and cannot allow the government to target different viewpoints and try and punish, repress, and marginalize them. I think everyone who's been targeted, the critical thing is to stand up, and stand up now. Refuse to be intimidated. This is about intimidation, and all of us need to stand up and say, no, we're not going to be intimidated, and we're going to pursue this to the end to get the answers we need.
The process is underway. Panel, thank you.